All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this committee the whole meeting of the Arlington Heights Village Board to order on Monday, October 28, 2019, and ask if you would please rise and join the Village Board in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, for purposes of roll, let me just introduce the board members who are with us tonight. To your right are Trustee Greg Padovani, Trustee Jim Tinaglia, Trustee John Scaletta, Trustee Robin LaBedz, Trustee and President Pro Tem Bert Rosenberg, Trustee Mary Beth Canty, Trustee Rich Baldino, Trustee Tom Schwingbeck, and I'm Village President Tom Hayes. Well, this is a very important public meeting tonight in the history of the Village of Arlington Heights. I'm not sure Mr. Dunton and our founding fathers could have envisioned back in 1887 when we were founded that we would be talking about the sale of recreational marijuana here in 2019. But nevertheless, that's where we find ourselves this evening. And so thank you for coming this evening, for providing the input that you're going to tonight, and participating in the democratic process and this very important decision-making process. And I just want to assure you in advance of any of your comments that the Village Board does take this very seriously, and we do consider all input available to us, all information available to us before we make a decision. And so your input on this very important issue has been very important over the past couple of months that we've been considering it, and will certainly be important tonight in our deliberations and decision-making process as well. So again, thank you for coming tonight. I just want to go over the roadmap of what we're going to do tonight. First, we'll have a short presentation, I believe about 15, 20 minutes by our staff, just to update us on some of the new developments and some of the proposed ordinances that are on the table in front of us for our consideration. And then we'll go to the board for questions on what was just presented by the staff. We won't deliberate or vote at that time, but the board will have an opportunity to ask questions for clarification, which might solve or answer some of the questions that you have. And so hopefully that'll shorten the evening just a little bit. And then we'll go to the public. Right now I have about 30 blue cards from individuals who would like to address the Village Board on this issue. We are limiting, as we do in all of our public meetings, the audience participants to 3 minutes, and that's a maximum of 3 minutes. So if you do the math, and I'm not really good at math, but I think I can figure this one out, 30 times 3 is 90 minutes, and so that's about an hour and a half of public testimony. I imagine we'll have probably a few more than that. So you figure an hour and a half to 2 hours of public comment. That's better than I think most of us expected, so hopefully it won't be as late of an evening as most of us had anticipated. But then once the public has had an opportunity to provide input, then we'll come back to the board for deliberation and hopefully a motion and a vote this evening. And so that's kind of the roadmap. I do want to just caution the members of the public before we start the public hearing process, the public meeting process. You do have a maximum of 3 minutes, but again, that's a maximum. So if you don't want to take all your 3 minutes, please don't, as a courtesy to all of us, so that we get to bed at a reasonable hour tonight. So if you want to just come up and say, I believe you should opt out or opt in, and then go sit down, feel free to do that. Or if you want to just say, I concur with the previous speaker, and then go sit down, that's fine as well. So we're looking for ways to short circuit, but not prevent public input. And so we very much appreciate your cooperation in that. And also, we are very respectful of each other's time here in this village boardroom. And we want to make sure that we're courteous, not only to the village board members up here and to the staff, but also to the other members of the public who've chosen to come tonight. So as I've always said, there will be no clapping, after people speak, and likewise, there'll be no booing or hissing or throwing of tomatoes or anything like that. So we just want to make sure that we're maintaining decorum in this room. So we're going to make sure that we police that as much as possible. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Recklaus, our village manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Staff will be providing some background information tonight related to the issue of whether or not the village should allow the location of adult use, or as it's sometimes called, recreational cannabis dispensaries in the village, and if so, under what conditions they should be allowed. Staff will not be discussing the issue of whether or not cannabis should be legal, nor will be discussing the impacts of legalized cannabis on our community, as those matters are out of our hands and have been resolved at the state level. The village government, most notably the police department, is and will be working on any and all adjustments to procedures and operations as necessary as a result of legal cannabis. But regardless of what is determined this evening, adult use cannabis will be legal in Arlington Heights on January 1st, and its use and possession as limited by state law will no longer be a crime. Tonight, the only matter at hand is whether it should be sold in Arlington Heights, and what the impacts of its sale could be, and what regulations should be in effect if allowed. Staff will be looking for direction from the village board this evening on whether or not to move forward with ordinances to prohibit or regulate and tax adult use cannabis. As this is a policy matter, staff will be making no recommendation. If the board chooses to prohibit cannabis sales, then the appropriate ordinance will be ready for a final vote in November. If the board chooses to allow and regulate cannabis sales, the new zoning rules will be reviewed by the Plan Commission before a final vote by the village board later this year. In any event, the goal is for final action to be taken by the village board prior to January 1st of 2020. If no action is taken by the village board, cannabis businesses would be allowed with no restrictions other than what is spelled out under the state statute. With that, I would like to hand things over to our in-house counsel, Robin Ward, who's going to be giving some background on the state law.
Thank you. Some of this is going to be a little bit repetitive, but it'll probably help just to make sure that the point is made. The law was passed. Adult use cannabis is legal for anybody 21 and over. That becomes effective January 1st. The state is going to be issuing up to 185 dispensary licenses. Those can go first to the medical dispensary license holders. So anybody who has a current medical dispensary license has the ability to get a license to sell cannabis without the medical restrictions. The village has a medical dispensary on the south end of town. The state law, I'll get into this in a little bit more detail, contains pretty significant limitations on advertising. Cannabis users cannot use cannabis in public. They can't, like alcohol, they can't drive while they're intoxicated or under the influence. So what municipalities can do is completely prohibit the sale of cannabis within the town. They can permit some. There's a bunch of different kinds of cannabis businesses. They can permit some of them. They can permit none of them. They can permit all of them. They can create licensing location regulations for any and all businesses that we choose to permit. They can prohibit the on-premises consumption of cannabis or permit it. They can tax the sale of adult use cannabis, not medical marijuana, adult use cannabis up to 3%. And that's in addition to the other sales taxes that are present in the state. And then the village has the ability to ensure that dispensaries are following the law, including not selling to individuals under 21. Again, what the village cannot do is ban the lawful use or possession of cannabis within the town, and they cannot determine who does or does not get a license. The licensing of cannabis businesses is controlled completely by the state. So, okay. The state law, it's pretty comprehensive. It's like 700 pages long. It lists the things that cannabis dispensaries cannot do. They can't sell it online, can't do drive-through windows, can't sell it through vending, they can't sell alcohol, they can't sell live plants. Nobody under the age of 21 can get into a cannabis dispensary. The products are not, you can't reach onto a shelf and just grab whatever it is you want. It all has to be protected behind the counters. And again, they have to double check the age of everybody entering the business. And just a little side note there, I'm sure everybody's seen a whole bunch of billboards and advertisements for products with CBD oils. CBD is totally lawful. There's nothing in it that makes it illegal, so drugstores sell CBD. CBD in and of itself is legal. That's got nothing to do with these regulations. These are products that have the THC in them. So, one of the things that the state law has a strict prohibition on is its strict regulations relates to advertising. It limits what can be on the advertising and where they can advertise. So, for instance, cannabis businesses can't use the cannabis leaf on their advertising. They can't advertise within 1,000 feet of all those different kinds of businesses. They can't include any image that somebody may see as being perceived as attractive to minors. So, for instance, toys, gummy bears, those kinds of things. They can't advertise that way. So there's a whole bunch of very strict regulations on what they can and can't do in terms of advertising. So most of this, I think we've already said. Landlords have a right to say that their tenants can't use it. That's a landlord-tenant issue. Again, that's not a village issue. And only medical cannabis users can grow. And there's a limit of 5 plants per household for any medical cannabis users. So there's that. This is you.
Yep. Staff from every village department have discussed and examined the impacts of potential cannabis dispensaries in the village over the past few months. Staff does anticipate that there will be operational impacts, particularly for the police department, related to the legalization of cannabis in our community. There will be costs and additional training required and some changes to our procedures. Exactly what those costs will be is currently unknown. The department has formed an internal task force to address necessary changes in procedures and operations in light of the change in law, taking into account the experiences of other law enforcement agencies elsewhere who have been dealing with these issues. But again, regardless of what happens tonight, adult use cannabis will be legal in Arlington Heights, and those operational adjustments will still need to be made. However, village staff, including staff from the police and fire departments, do not believe that the location of an adult use cannabis dispensary or dispensaries in our community will have an impact on staff time or public safety. The calls for service at the current medical cannabis dispensary have been very typical of any retail establishment. As Robin just noted, there are much heavier than normal regulations related to the management of product at a cannabis dispensary than at a typical retail establishment or a liquor store. And this suggests that shoplifting would be less than a typical retail establishment. The main unknown currently is parking and traffic. We simply just don't know what the impact will be, so we're going to have to monitor it. We don't know what kind of throughput they're going to have in terms of customers and traffic these types of uses will generate, because we just don't have any. The police department does plan on conducting stings to ensure that minors are not being sold cannabis or even allowed into any potential dispensary, just as we do for retailers that sell alcohol or tobacco products. If adult use cannabis dispensaries are allowed in Arlington Heights, there will be associated revenue. The following taxes would apply. 1% regular sales tax, the village's home rule sales tax, which is an additional 1%, and the village has the option to pass an additional cannabis tax up to 3%. It should be noted that the cannabis tax cannot go into effect until September of 2020 under the state rules. The other two can go into effect as early as January 1st. Staff did attempt to estimate potential revenue for the village from these sources. Staff took a look at what the per capita cannabis sales are in Colorado and divided it by the 185 dispensaries that would be allowed in Illinois. And we also cross-checked these numbers with some industry estimates. We then lowered both of those estimates substantially because we always want to be conservative. Based on that analysis, we estimate that a single dispensary would generate in the ballpark of $500,000, but we're saying conservatively from $300,000 to $500,000 annually for the village. Multiple dispensaries would obviously generate more than that. However, as with any other type of business, we cannot say that 2 dispensaries would generate twice the revenue of 1 dispensary, as they would likely be competing for some of the same dollars. So what does $300,000 to $500,000 amount to? Just as a point of reference, it's roughly the same revenue as a medium-sized car dealership. Another way to look at it is it's about the same as a 1.5% increase or decrease in the village portion of your property tax bill. About 12% of your property tax bill goes to the village. So for a homeowner of a $300,000 home, a 1.5% increase or decrease in the village's portion of his or her property tax bill would be about $15 for a given year. Thus far, we've had a couple of discussions with different village bodies on this topic. The village board discussed this topic back in August, and at that time they asked staff to draft up options for consideration, which we've done for this evening. And they also asked for input from the Arlington Economic Alliance and the village's Board of Health. The Arlington Economic Alliance recommended that adult use cannabis dispensaries be allowed. The village's Board of Health recommended that adult use cannabis business establishments be prohibited. So they got a little bit of mixed advice on that issue. So what are our options this evening? Option one is for the board to consider approval of an ordinance prohibiting adult use cannabis dispensaries and other cannabis businesses at this time, other than medical dispensaries, which we cannot regulate any further. Option two is to consider approval of an ordinance that would allow adult use cannabis dispensaries, subject to zoning rules that define the location, conditions under which they'd be allowed, and then obviously approval of a sales tax for adult use cannabis can also be considered under this option. So now I'm going to turn things back to Robin so she can discuss the content of the ordinances that have been drafted for the board's consideration.
Okay, just to emphasize again, staff isn't recommending any of these. Staff drafted it so that it would be options for the board to discuss. So what's identified as Ordinance A in all the materials online that anybody's seen is the ordinance that simply just completely prohibits adult use cannabis, any type of adult use cannabis business. That includes dispensaries, growers, any of those kinds of things. The list is up there. That's what Ordinance A does. It's just a complete and total ban. Ordinance B sets forth some, move up. It's okay. Ordinance B is the second ordinance, and that's the one that includes a list of regulations. They're not even necessarily suggestions. They're designed as what could be considered reasonable, but obviously they could be, if the board is interested in permitting cannabis dispensaries, these are some suggestions. They could be changed in any way, shape, or form. First and foremost, this ordinance only permits cannabis dispensaries. It prohibits every other kind of adult use cannabis business. So this only deals with dispensaries. It's intended to limit it limits 3 dispensaries. It permits the 3 dispensaries only in the B2 and B3 zoning districts. You may want to throw the map up. So this map, if you look at this map, the B2 and B3 zoning districts are the red and orangey kinds of ones. So those would be the only areas that dispensaries would be permitted. Staff then divided the village into 3 pieces to permit 1 dispensary north of Hintz Road, 1 dispensary between Hintz and Central, excluding the downtown, and 1 dispensary south of Central, which is as the location, there's a little dot, that's where the medical dispensary is now. All the areas in yellow are the areas in which dispensaries could not be located. Staff has included that they shouldn't be located within 1,000 feet of schools and parks and park-like facilities. So those areas in yellow are all the areas where they couldn't be permitted. So if you're looking at the map, anything in that sort of red and lighter red color are the areas where they could be permitted. And then, again, you can see sort of the darker lines where the northern boundary is, and then the southern in the middle. So that's perfect. As drafted, the ordinance is suggesting that dispensaries be a permitted use as opposed to a special use. And the reason that it was drafted this way is because liquor stores and drugstores are both permitted uses in B2s and B3s. Cannabis dispensaries will be undergoing significantly more regulation. They're more tightly regulated than liquor stores or drugstores in terms of the state licensing, in terms of what they can sell, in terms of how they can sell it. in terms of who's allowed in the premises, they're much more tightly regulated. So for that reason, we think it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of special use. Additionally, by the time any regulations, if the board's going to favor that, will have been adopted, there will have been public meetings at the board level, a public hearing at the Plan Commission, so there will not be a lot of regulations left that a special use would sort of qualify for, particularly because the recommendation, or the ordinance, if it's going to be adopted, would include location restrictions and the other kinds of things that would normally come into play with a special use. The only exception, as Randy mentioned earlier, related to parking, and because we have no idea what the potential parking impact would be, the ordinance is drafted suggesting that if the board wants to permit dispensaries, that staff have the ability to require parking studies if it's deemed necessary based on where within these 3 locations they may go. And that's the summary.
Did you want to mention the Dundee and Arlington Heights Road issue?
Oh, yeah. The one thing we did add is this, thanks, is there, in addition to the 3 general areas and the 3 locations, there's an exception for not permitting one within 1,000 feet of the intersection of Dundee Road and Arlington Heights Road, because on the northeast corner is Buffalo Grove High School, which is not in Arlington Heights, and the village can't regulate areas outside its boundaries. But there's property across the street that is in Arlington Heights. So to make sure that there wasn't one that could go within 1,000 feet of the high school in Arlington Heights, because the school's in Buffalo Grove, we've added that parameter as well to ensure that the village doesn't permit anything within that close to Buffalo Grove High School. And that's really it in terms of the restrictions that are proposed. Obviously, any of them could be changed if the will of the board is to permit them. So there's, yeah.
So the other question that we've gotten that's been kind of a moving target is, what are other communities in our area doing? And so we put together this list. These are which communities in our area have made a determination or given direction as to whether they're going to be prohibiting or allowing adult use cannabis. There are other communities in our area that have given some indication of which way they're leaning, but because they didn't make a definitive vote, we kept them off this list. Obviously, there's more communities that haven't made a decision than those that have. But, you can see there are a number of communities in our direct area that have made decisions, even in the last couple of weeks. But I just wanted to put that out there as a point of reference, and obviously if people have questions on that, we can go back. But with that, staff would be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Well, thanks, Randy and Robin. One thing that came out at the last public meeting was the little confusion as to whether or not what we're doing tonight impacts the sale of medical marijuana. I just want to make sure for everyone in the audience tonight and those watching at home that any decision we make tonight will have absolutely no impact on the sale of medical marijuana in the village of Arlington Heights. So we have 1 medical dispensary down on the south side, and that will remain in full force and effect. Whatever decision we make tonight will have no impact on that dispensary. And so if you were planning to talk about the benefits of medical marijuana, you don't need to do that, because that's not at issue tonight. Just want to make that clear. So any questions from the board on the staff's presentation before we go to the audience? Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I just have a couple of questions. Who is responsible for ensuring that a dispensary, if it is allowed, adheres to the state law? Other than the stings that were mentioned that the village could do for sales to under 21, there's obviously, you went through the list of a number of things not allowed. So who's responsible for that?
The state oversees the state regulations. Because it's state licensed, it's not village licensed.
So they would be responsible for coming in and ensuring that wherever any dispensary,
As they do now with the medical marijuana dispensaries.
Correct. If we were, they would have their own enforcement process, but if we, through our own enforcement, made them aware that someone was doing something they shouldn't, it would be on them to take action, revoke or suspend a license or whatever the case may be.
and And I have one other question. It may have been somewhere, but I don't remember. How are the hours regulated?
Oh, it is.
If allowed.
I want to say it's between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m., but if you give me,
Sounds right.
but I'm going to tell you that give me a chance I can confirm that. But I think it's between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m.
It's 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. local time, correct?
There we go.
All right, thank you. Those are the only questions I have at this time.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. Randy, could you put up the slide with the communities, the list? All right. So I don't see on here, as you mentioned, a number of them that are on our adjacent borders, our immediate borders. I do see Buffalo Grove here. Can you run down a list off the top of your head of exactly what are the communities that are our immediate adjacent borders of ours?
Sure. Buffalo Grove, Prospect Heights. We have Mount Prospect, Elk Grove, Palatine, and Rolling Meadows.
So it's 6, right? 6 altogether. And we only have one on here that is made a decision so far?
Wheeling too.
No, in Wheeling as well.
Is Wheeling an actual border?
They've got, I
Yes.
think they
Up north.
touched.
So that's 7.
Yeah.
So 2 of the 7 are on this list of allowing, but we're not sure about the other 5 yet. Is that right?
Correct. They have not made any kind of definitive formal action yet.
Okay.
They're all in various stages of discussing and considering.
Like we are tonight, they're in
Exactly.
different. So, and timing wise on this, we're working on this tonight. What's the timing situation? When does this need to be decided?
So if the board were to make a determination to allow adult use cannabis, the zoning rules would be going to the Plan Commission in November. There would be a public hearing process on that, and it would be limited in scope to the zoning changes. And then our goal would be to get, depending on if there are any changes that the Plan Commission made or any recommendations, to get this before the board at some time in December. And then it would be approved, it has to be approved prior to January 1st.
Right, if it's not approved by January 1st, then there are no regulations in place.
No regulation. What does
Then
that mean, Robin?
That means
exactly?
that everybody can open on a whim, because we have not adopted any local regulations. So their only limitations are whatever, the state doesn't even have any location limitations or anything like that. So if we don't prohibit it or permit it with regulations, then they're permitted at will.
So it behooves all of us, those communities that are still
Absolutely.
not on this list, and us to make a decision and get it on the books before
Absolutely.
December 31st. Is that what you
Correct.
said?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that answered. Thank you.
Anybody else right now? Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor. Robin, I have one question. When you were talking before, you said that the only permitted business, if we were to opt in, would be the adult use dispensary. Is
Well,
that-
the ordinance B as drafted only permits dispensaries. It
Right.
prohibits every other type of cannabis, adult use cannabis business.
Okay, so my understanding is that there are a couple of loophole businesses, and correct me if I'm wrong, but infusers are one of those that.
Those are prohibited.
Those are prohibited.
Those
They're
are on our
specifically
our
prohibited?
prohibited list, prohibited everything other than dispensaries.
And bring your own cannabis and specialty growers, those are all prohibited?
All prohibited.
Okay, thank you. That was my question. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, any further questions from the board? All right, seeing none, we'll go then to the audience, and so I think we're doing pretty good in terms of time frame. So let me just remind you again that we're going to hold everyone to the 3-minute maximum time limit. Please don't use the 3 minutes if you don't need to, but I'm going to strictly enforce the 3-minute time limit just so we make sure we stay on task and on schedule. So because it's World Series time. It's my favorite time of year. The Cubs are not in the World Series, but I'm still a big baseball fan, and so we're going to use some baseball terms tonight in calling on individuals to speak. So I'm going to call on the individual who's going to be speaking, and then I'm going to call on the person who's on deck, in the on deck circle. And that person should get ready to go. If you want to go ahead and get up and stand somewhat behind the current speaker, you can do that. Don't crowd them too much, but somewhere down the aisle, that would be appreciated, so we can keep things moving. So I'm going to do the best I can with your names. I apologize in advance if I have trouble with some of your last names. So First speaker tonight is Mary Lou Bava, and next will be, on deck, will be Tom Ramsden.
Good evening. I had spoken on this in last August, and I've spoken to all of you before on this subject. And what I have to say today is that Arlington Heights is a great place to raise a family. What is the cost of legal pot? Is it worth the cost of families, communities, and lives? The increase of the THC, which I mentioned before, from 3% to 12%, has been increased thanks to the selected plant breeders. Drugs it's a big problem in our country, and no one of you can deny that. What was stated from the Economic Committee, they voted to opt in, since their concern is the investment in a hot market. I noticed that the Health Department voted to opt out. I'm not going to continue with anything else. I'll give everyone else a chance. But you know where I stand, how I feel, and I've spoken to all of you before. Thank you for this opportunity.
Right. Thank you, Mary Lou. And just to clarify something Mary Lou said, it was the Board of Health, which is an appointed board of citizens of Arlington Heights, that made the recommendation to opt out, not the Health Department, which are employees of the village, just to clarify that. So Tom Ramsden, and then on deck will be Sue Hayes.
Good evening, Mayor Hayes and trustees. My name is Tom Ramsden. I'm the Vice President of Development at St. Viator High School. And on behalf of our administration, we appreciate this opportunity to express our concerns regarding the sale of recreational cannabis in Arlington Heights. St. Viator High School strives to help all of our students grow academically, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. With that goal in mind, we implemented drug testing for all students in 2007. This initiative has 3 goals: to deter students from using drugs, to identify students who need help with drug use, and to teach students accountability for their decisions. We hope to count with the village's support in helping our school and all the other great schools in the area and the community at large to meet these goals by prohibiting the sale of recreational marijuana. It's very important to note that as of October 24th, the CDC has reported 1,604 cases of lung injury and 34 deaths due to vaping or e-cigarette use. Furthermore, it is believed to be related to products containing THC. To quote the CDC, THC has been associated with a wide range of health effects, particularly with prolonged and heavy use. The best way to avoid potentially harmful effects is not to use THC, including through e-cigarette and vaping products. In speaking with students testing positive for marijuana use, vaping is one of the preferred methods of use. Some will argue that these issues and deaths are due to black market products. That is not a definitive conclusion the CDC has reached. The sole purpose of the village board is not to raise revenue by any means. As the village's website states, throughout its long history, Arlington Heights has remained steadfast in providing municipal services that are responsive to the needs of the residents and businesses and are reliable, efficient, and fiscally responsible. Prohibiting the sale of recreational cannabis would fulfill this mandate. Sales of recreational cannabis are not a need of the residents. Promotion of healthy choices and protection of its residents, particularly its youth, is. Allowing the sale of recreational cannabis that has been linked to illness and death is not fiscally responsible, but arguably ethically irresponsible. We are so thankful for the village's desire to create a safe, supportive community. We are confident that you will respond to the safety and ethical concerns that recreational cannabis sales presents, and we trust that you will vote to prohibit the recreational sales of cannabis in the great village of Arlington Heights. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Tom. Next is Sue Hayes, and then on deck is Ann Udell. And lest anyone think there was some favoritism with Sue Hayes being towards the front, she was actually the number 1 card, and out of deference to her, she was bumped back a little bit, so welcome.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. Took 28 years for me to have to come and talk to you. My name is Sue Hayes. I've lived in this community for 36 years. I am a registered nurse and a certified asthma educator, and I've worked 22 years in pediatric pulmonology. The cost to the community will be far greater than the amount you will get from the tax dollars. You'll have increased costs in education, in police costs, and in health care, particularly mental health care, where there's the most research done from what I could find. I will be brief because I'm not going to get into the health issues of the use of marijuana. But when you make it more easily and readily and socially available in the community, it may be just for adults, but the youth in the community will have more access as well. Every day, I take history on kids, ages 12 and up, who are, if not using, they're exposed to, their friends are using it. It's not just the adults who will be using the marijuana. A principle of public health nursing is that it costs less to prevent a problem than to treat it. The state government has removed our option to prevent this problem. It is our obligation not to endorse or promote the use of marijuana in our community. We need to do what's right. I ask you to vote for option 1 to permit the sale of recreational cannabis in Arlington Heights. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ann Udell, and then on deck is Bob Schwartz.
She got into what one of the things that I was going to discuss. The law says that you have to be 21 to be able to buy it, 21 to be able to buy liquor, but we all know as parents that young children, young teenagers have their own ways of getting around everything. You're going to have somebody who's 21 that every kid knows and is a friend of, or a friend with a friend, and they're going to be out there supplying it to these children. Now, I have seen in my own family what drugs have done to people, children, young children. It is beyond my comprehension that adults would think that something like providing something like this would not affect our children, not only as young people, but as adults. Program on TV talked about how the marijuana damages your brain beyond any kind of health you can get in the future. And as far as I can see, I have no desire to see anyone I know or anyone I love ever get involved in something like this. And I can't imagine any parent who would think that legalizing marijuana is not something that we as parents and as adults do not want to put out there as easy access to our children and our future adults. Thank you so much, and please consider not voting yes on this.
Thanks, Ann. Next is Bob Schwartz, and then John Juan.
Gentlemen, ladies, I've been thinking for the last half hour what I was going to say. Got a couple of thoughts. They're quite subjective, but they probably would determine just how I would vote tonight, would be to oppose it with everything I could. I can remember years ago when a psychoanalyst wanted to get to the truth coming out of someone, he would go through, tell me the first thing that pops into your mind if I say Coca-Cola or I say Cadillac. And it was a pretty good way to get to the truth of what was really on that person's mind. And so I would ask everyone here, when I say the word cannabis or marijuana or pot, what are 5 things that immediately pop into your mind? Foregoing what we've been talking about here for the last couple of months. Those 5 things that would pop into my mind would really want to make me run once more again for anything that had to do with the smoking of cannabis. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Next is John Juan, and then Laurie Taylor.
Good evening, Mayor Hayes and trustees. I and my wife moved to Arlington Heights 19 years ago because we heard a lot of good things in this community. Family-oriented, great schools, and a great community, and especially great village officials take care residents and the community. And my wife raised 2 wonderful children. I'm standing here on their behalf also. Marijuana is a gateway to drug and highly addictive. State officials have made mistake for us. Now it's up to you to make a decision for us. As of today, even with proper education at home and school, teaching kids do not use or try any drug. Drug is still big problem in school. Open this kind of business in our town will send a wrong message to our children. It will impact our family value and belief. Only rely on education children at home or school to prevent drug abuse isn't solution for this issue. Kids don't just listen what we say. They see what we do. Making marijuana easy access for kids will make the problem worse. We just compound the problem. From news reported recently, 81% of business owners have started to worry about their employee consumption on recreational marijuana because they know it will impact employees' behavior and performance. Please retain local business trust in our village. If recreational marijuana dispensary opens in our town, it will be consumed most by locals and the local business employees. When people's core value and the community value are weakened and ruined, it will be hard to restore. As of today, we already learned a lot of villages opt out. At latest, we learned DuPage County, whole county, has banned to opt out marijuana at the whole county level. Please say no to marijuana and use this opportunity to send a clear message to our residents. Strengthen our family value and build great Arlington as a brand cannot be measured by money. Please, we don't need any part of tax money in our village. Please opt out for our wonderful family, community, and the generations to come. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, John. Next is Laurie Taylor, and then Brock McNerney.
Hi again. Everybody, this has been written about in countless magazines and newspapers, websites, and everything. But Randy, you brought up a great number. Do you know that most of the villages around have been told to anticipate sales tax revenue of about $500,000 a year? Well, in order to be able to receive $500,000 in a year, you're going to have retail sales of $16.5 million a year. Add that with all the other suburbs, let's say 5 suburbs around us, that's almost $100 million in sales of cannabis. And a lot of the other villages have been actually quoted in the paper saying that they voted yes only because the other towns around them have voted yes. So why not let our town get the tax revenue they're getting also? I think that's a pretty foolish reason, but that's, of course, my own opinion. Another thing, where I noticed that the sales tax isn't collected until September 2020, when did the dispensaries actually start opening? When can they open, January 1st or September 20?
They would be able to open January 1st. Some sales tax would be generated immediately, some would be in September.
Okay, and then there's, just remember this, right now, this is strictly a cash business. And so the sales tax that is being told to the state or given to the state is figured out by the honest businessman. In other words, do I really trust that person saying how much they've actually had in sales? So those are just questions to be raised. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie. Next is Brock McNerney, and then Calvin Lindstrom.
Good evening. This last weekend, I had the opportunity to visit a dispensary in Washington, in Seattle in particular. And I was struck by a few things. One, I couldn't tell from the outside just exactly what was going on in the business. It wasn't really as busy outside as Peggy Canane's is on a Friday or Saturday night. The other thing I was struck by when I got inside was who was in there. It wasn't the godless rabble that we all tend to associate with an issue like this, and it was really a representation of this community, which struck me right away. The other thing that struck me was the age of the people in the dispensary. They were older than I thought they would be. They were probably, the average age was close to 35, late 30s. Just the same age that I was when I moved to this community to raise my family. And this is a community that has no problem with cigarettes, alcohol, or gambling. And given the people that I saw in this dispensary and another one I drove past, I just don't see that, I don't see that it's going to be anything other than the community itself, the people that we know, our neighbors, our friends, people that we've gone to school with, grown up with. I think everyone would be very surprised at what I saw, and regardless of the fact of how we feel, it's coming, and it's going to be big. 300 to 500,000 might be on the high side. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around the lady that did the math just before me, but it's going to be here, and whether people are buying it here or in the next town over, it's going to be people that we know. It's going to be people that we know and that we respect. They're going to be buying this. So I just wanted you to take that into consideration when you vote tonight. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Brock. Next is Calvin Lindstrom, and then Mike Choten.
Good evening, Board. I am privileged to not live in Arlington Heights, though I have in the past, but I have been part of this community for 34 years, ever since our church and school moved to this village, and we do appreciate the support that we've been given, and hopefully we've been a good friend of the village at Christian Liberty Academy, and that relationship, I trust, will continue. It was interesting that the previous speaker mentioned Seattle. I would strongly recommend a documentary called Seattle is Dying. It is a documentary that was produced by a TV station there, which shows the effect of the drug culture in Seattle. It's not just marijuana, I should point out, but Seattle is a dying city, in part because the policies have promoted a culture that is heading downhill, affecting businesses, affecting the community. So not to contradict what that previous speaker was saying, but I would encourage that very strongly. I do think it is important that a community like Arlington Heights stand apart from other communities that are supporting the sale of recreational marijuana. I think it is a good testimony that a village says, no, we're not going to do this. As we look at our nation, we are a confederation of states, and states make different choices. Illinois is at the bottom of a lot of those choices, unfortunately. And I had a chance to hear the presentation by State Senator Heather Stearns. It was billed as a community meeting. It wasn't. It was a sales pitch to try to get people on board, and I was very disappointed. So what it leaves is Arlington Heights and other communities to say, no, we don't have to go along with the flow. And yes, other villages will be doing it, maybe even nearby villages like Buffalo Grove, but I think it is still a good testimony that Arlington Heights would say, no, we're not going to do this, because laws do reflect a morality. And I think that should be the most important thing, the morality of this. And so I would strongly encourage the board to take option one, to ban the sales. It's not going to solve all the problems, but I think it helps sends a message to children. As the speaker from St. Viator stated, I would strongly echo that. For the sake of our children, let's just say no. Thank you.
Thanks, Calvin. Next is Mike Choten, and then Norbert Pirotrovsky.
Thank you. I'm a resident and a proud parent of a 9 and 11-year-old here in the village of Arlington Heights, and I'm also a graduate of St. Viator High School, so I've been in the community quite some time. With all due respect to everyone here, the fact of the matter is cannabis is in Illinois regardless of what the village does. Our residents will purchase and consume cannabis. Arlington Heights is a great family community and place to raise kids. This will not change that. I don't take my kids to Lover's Lane sex store on Arlington Heights and Gulf Road. I don't take my kids to the various vape shops that have been in the village limits. I know some of them have closed now. I don't take my kids to play or go in the parking lot of Cardinal Liquors across the street. I don't take my kids to Arlington Park on a Wednesday when responsible adults are consuming adult beverages and legally placing wagers. I don't take my kids to the downtown bar district on a weekend night when people are enjoying themselves. The areas under consideration are not near parks, they're not near schools, they're not near family gathering areas. 12 and Palatine Road is an empty mall that is dying for businesses. The southern part of Arlington Heights is also lacking businesses. The popular family downtown district where restaurants is not under consideration here. I strongly urge the board to support this measure and to opt in. As was stated earlier, the village is going to incur expenses regardless of what we do here. Other towns around us are going to enjoy revenues of this to help cover those expenses. And lastly, in closing, I agree that Mr. Dunton, our village founder, wouldn't believe we are here today debating this. However, I believe he wouldn't believe it because he wouldn't believe that it's illegal. Because back then it wasn't illegal, and our founding fathers grew cannabis on their farms. Again, I strongly urge the village to vote to opt in. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mike. Next is Norbert Pirotrovsky, and then Keith Moons.
Mayor Hayes and village board members, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Norbert Pirotrovsky. I live at 211 North Dwyer Avenue in Arlington Heights. I am against the legalization of recreational marijuana sales in Arlington Heights. Legalizing recreational marijuana was a big mistake in Illinois. Colorado legalized pot 5 years ago, and they found that the revenue gain does not offset the societal problems. Addiction, health concerns, DUI concerns are a big problem. Pot is a gateway drug to cocaine and heroin. Pot lowers teenage cognitive abilities for life. I don't want Arlington Heights to endorse this big mistake just for increased tax revenue. Any Arlington Heights board member who votes for legalized pot sales in Arlington Heights will lose my vote in the next election. Thank you.
Thanks, Norb. Next is Keith Moons, and then Juan Luo.
Good evening, everyone. President Hayes, thank you. My name is Keith Moons. I live in Arlington Heights. I'm at 636 South Cleveland. I would request that the board approve Ordinance B and C that allows the retail sales of recreational cannabis in Arlington Heights. Now, here's my opinion anyway. I do share the concern of many of my friends and neighbors here regarding the underage use of any legally available intoxicating substance. I also share the concern about impaired drivers. I do share their concerns. These are two concerns that have kept parents up late at night for generations upon generations. However, there is exactly a zero connection between prohibiting the sale of cannabis in Arlington Heights and solving either one of underage use and impaired driving. In other words, the reality is that whether cannabis sales are allowed or not in Arlington Heights, we will still have the generations-old problem of underage use, underage use and impaired driving. If people want to get it, they'll find it somewhere, whether it's legal in Arlington Heights or not. So opting out is largely symbolic. It's based upon a myth, I think, that will solve these concerns, and we know that they won't. So I think we have an opportunity. We have a rare opportunity here in our village, in Arlington Heights. We have the chance to control, regulate, collect tax revenue up to $500,000 a year, and ensure the safety of the cannabis that's going to be sold. With some of those tax receipts, we can purchase the police equipment that we're going to have to buy anyway to detect impaired driving, because people are going to be driving through Arlington Heights to go to Buffalo Grove and Schaumburg and these other towns that are allowing it. But I think even better, we can set up and possibly even coordinate education programs with neighboring towns that have already approved the sale of cannabis. These education programs will inform our young adults on the danger of using all intoxicating substances, set up after-school programs, summer reading programs, part-time and summertime jobs, programs that take the place of substance abuse. I think we all have the best interests of our young adults in mind. We all do. We all have our best interests in mind. So let's do our young adults a big favor and accept the reality of our situation and send a positive message that we are concerned about our child's health by allowing the retail sales of cannabis in Arlington Heights.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you.
Next is Juan Luo, and then Rob Cataldo is on deck.
Thank you. I'm standing here as a father of 2 kids, and I'm pleading to the Board of Trustees, vote no to cannabis. The reason is very simple. We want to send a clear message to our kids. Stay away from drugs. Even if it is illegalized, doesn't mean they are socially acceptable. All of us would agree Arlington Heights is known for a family-friendly community. We have the best libraries, we have the best park district, we build good schools, we invest millions or tens of millions of dollars to make sure our kids have, including our adults too, to have the best facility to engage positively. Now we're talking about for the mere $500K of gain, and nobody has mentioned any of the hidden cost of make the cannabis to be widely accessible. I know some of the parents said, I'm not going to take my kids to the drug stores, but your kids are going to grow up. They're not going to spend 24 hours with you. You need to be watch out. And people are saying this is not doable because the other town is going to vote a yes. But for us, I really pleading to our Board of Trustees, let's do the right thing. Jim pointed out very importantly, all these towns around us, only 2 of them made decisions. We really want our board to set a good example, really deliver a clear message. We should say no for our family values. This is really, really logically is silly for the gain of $500K, which is somebody already challenged. This is probably even just the paper money. And the hidden cost is way, way more than that. Not just our Board of Health already recommended from health purpose. We should not do that. This is really a bad trade. Just logically, it doesn't make any sense. And just morally, this is just not the right thing to do. It's not the correct message you want to deliver to our young kids. Someone said this is not doable. I would say, do the right thing, try your best, and prevent the problem. Make it, instead of trying to prevent the problem first, right? Instead of trying to figure out how to just stay away from it. And This is, I'm trying, like I said, do the right thing, and we know what, or just a really analogy of getting emotional. Somebody says it's not doable, but we should still try it. We know we're all gonna die, right? But you're still gonna try to fight every day to get your breath. You're not gonna die today because.
Len, just finish your thought if you would.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next is Rob Cataldo, and then Craig Horowitz.
Thank you so much, Board, for the opportunity for this to address you tonight. I just want to thank you all for your service on the board. I know you're taking up so much of your time and effort to be here tonight and to be here every night to serve this community, and I really do appreciate it. I just wanted to start off by saying, first of all, greater access equals greater use. It's been proved over and over again. I understand that we can allow recreational cannabis, Buffalo Grove can allow it on the other side of Palatine Road. However, if we do invite it into Arlington Heights, guarantee that there will be greater use, we will have additional costs as a village, but if we allow it into Arlington Heights, I guarantee those costs will be even greater because we're allowing the use into our communities. There's a reason why there's that 1,000-foot perimeter around schools. It's to keep the use away from the schools. We want to keep the use away from this community as much as possible as well. I won't restate what my other citizens have restated so eloquently about the effects of marijuana. I'll just to say, as the father of 4 from 9 to 15, it's a full-time job to keep them off marijuana, as it is right now. When I have my son asking me, you know, why do I not do it when it's going to be legal in the state? One thing that is consistent. So that aside, respect to time. That aside, what I will say in researching the subject, in talking to my friends in Colorado Springs and in other states. One thing that is consistent when you look at other states is simply that revenues are always overstated and social costs are always understated. Always. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. They always are. And when my friend in Colorado Springs had his car stolen in a very respectable community, he went down and talked to the police department there, and they just shook their heads. They said, since the legalization of marijuana, the Colorado Springs Police Department, they said there's been a 4-time increase in the amount of smash and grab burglaries of cars, and there's 4 times the increase in the homeless population. So you cannot bring your kids to the dispensaries. You cannot frequent those places as much as you want. But what you'll find, and what he told me as well, is that the state will take the revenues, the county will take the revenues, and that the actual citizens will see very few of the revenues or very few of the benefits themselves. However, we will, as a citizenry, guarantee you bear 100% of the social costs, right? I guarantee you that it will happen. And thanks to your incredible work on the board, and I've been here in the past in prior meetings and have heard nothing but fiscal success, and also as stated in the slide that we will not have to hire additional manpower from the police, the revenue argument falls a little short in that we need it. The one thing I want to state with my closing time is why not wait? Why not wait and replace estimates with actual facts from surrounding communities? There's nothing that says we can't vote on this again in another year, in another 2 years. I guarantee the state will allow us if we, and thanks again for my time.
Thanks, Rob. Next is Craig Horowitz, and then Hannah Kazelton.
Craig Horowitz. First of all, I live in Buffalo Grove, but because I live on the border, I've been involved in so many issues because I feel like I live in Arlington Heights. I'm here in hopes that this village will ultimately vote to not allow recreational cannabis in Arlington Heights. Your ordinance, one of them, would allow 1 of 3 sites not far from my house and Buffalo Grove High School. I heard a resident say it's not near a high school. Well, in fact, it is, near the intersection of Dundee and Arlington Heights Road. If this is about sales tax, revenue, keep in mind, according to the Denver, Colorado report, which I've given you, President Hayes, one of the most experienced cities and states in the United States regarding medical and recreational marijuana. And I'm told this village forecasts $500,000 in taxes. At 4%, that would equate to $12.5 million in sales. Divided by 3, that's $4 million per site. According to the Denver, Colorado report, after 5 years in village, the average recreational site does $820,000. And Of the 9% that they tax, because there's 9% tax in Denver, 26% of that goes to, 8% of it goes to regulation, 8% of it goes to enforcement, 10% of it goes to opioid intervention. Since 2014, in Denver, crime is up 8%. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 4,700 incidents. In 2018, crime is up 43%. Industry crime, that is crimes related to cannabis. And in 2017, DUIs related to cannabis are up 46%, but of course that's understated because so far, as far as I know, there's no curbside breathalyzer equivalent. The average, let's say that the average that this village is going to get between the three is $1 million. Figure at 4%. Less 26% for those expenses, regulation, enforcement, and opioid intervention. That equates to about $88,000 in net tax sales. This village's annual budget is $146 million. I tell you, it's not worth it. And I hope this village, different than Buffalo Grove, they do the right thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Next is Hannah Kazelton, and then Kip North.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Hannah Castleton, and I'm here on behalf of the Link Together Coalition, so Wheeling Township's Youth, Drug, and Alcohol Prevention Coalition. Link Together has served Arlington Heights students, schools, and residents with teen prevention programming for the last 8 years. We provide evidence-based programming in our schools, as well as community campaigns that have reached thousands of residents. We have passed on to each of you some of the concerns we have with high concentration THC vapes being sold in local dispensaries with names and flavors that appeal to kids. We know that marketing to teens works. Even though the age is 21 to purchase vaping products is currently the #1 substance used in our local schools, exceeding both alcohol and marijuana use. Marijuana vaping products with names such as Candyland, Banana Split, and High School Sweetheart are just a few of the products that we will see sold in local dispensaries. Link Together recognizes that the commercialization of marijuana increases the availability of edible marijuana products that appeal to teens. Science has also shown the link between marijuana use and increased incidences of psychosis. Thank you for considering this information that is based on scientific fact. Link Together has the opportunity to gather data from our local communities, including John Hersey High School. We are confident that the census data that we gather is accurate and consistent. Even though we know that the vast majority of our students at Hersey High School are choosing not to use marijuana, those that choose to use marijuana use a vape as their choice of delivery. At a time when there are serious concerns around vaping and lung injury around THC, we see teens turning toward vaping THC at an alarming rate. The current Illinois law has no THC limits for concentrates that would be sold in local dispensaries. It is a fact that the average concentration of THC was close to 4% in the 1990s. Today, we will see concentrates being sold in our local dispensaries as high as 90%.
Thanks, Hannah. Next is Kip North, and then Bruce Ticknell.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to each of you regarding this very important topic. My name is Kip North. I live at 323 West Berkeley Drive in North Arlington Heights, and I also happen to teach at Buffalo Grove High School. After attending the Buffalo Grove Village Board meeting last week, I walked away from that experience with a single conclusion, that facts and figures and studies and statistics are not going to help to determine the decision that you guys will make, or that any village boards in our area may make, because for every statistic stated for opposition, there seems to be an equally compelling statistic for being a proponent of this proposal. However, I am clearly against having dispensaries in a village that I grew up in and that I've chosen to live in. If the regulations are expected to be particularly restrictive, why is this a consideration at all? You have the opportunity at this in this moment to have you have an opportunity to say no. And I can certainly appreciate people who may be a proponent of this, focusing on the fact that the law states that this is for adults, quote unquote, people who are 21 or older. But I think the concerns that we're expressing collectively here in this room tonight are for the youth in our community and the normalization of cannabis use. Again, speaking about the restrictions, I think the 1,000 feet is particularly curious, and I appreciate that there being some consideration that Arlington Heights does border the high school at Buffalo Grove. But just as a visual for everybody in the room, 1,000 feet is 333 yards, 304 meters, which is less than a single lap around our stadium track. It's pretty close. The other thing that I found interesting, and I learned this after I'd gone to the Buffalo Grove meeting, I think it's particularly interesting as a citizen that the downtown area is not being considered. Because if, in fact, one of the motivations of us allowing this to happen is financial, and that we want to do as much as we may be able to in order to drive sales, the Flaherty Jeweler store on the corner of Dunton and Campbell seems like an ideal location for us to maximize profits. I think, this notion of accountability is particularly compelling because, in my opinion, and this is the things that we've learned through some of the programming that we used with Link Together, decisions and behaviors are based on values. And as I stated last week at the Village of Buffalo Grove board meeting, dependent upon what you decide as a board, in my opinion, you will clearly communicate to our community what the values of Village of Arlington Heights are. As I said, there are educational programs going on. I've said to a number of students that I've had the opportunity to work with over the course of 25 years, just because you can doesn't mean you ought to. And finally, I would encourage you to please assign the single percentage point to my tax bill. Thank you.
Thanks, Kip. Next is Bruce, no clapping, please. Bruce Tinknell, and then on deck is Heidi Tinknell.
Thank you, Board, for allowing the constituents of this village to speak. My name is Bruce Tinknell. I'm a 35-year resident and a village marketing research business owner. For 42 years, my global research company and experience, I can state conclusively we should not be a destination for retail marijuana. Why do I say that? Yes, the Cook County referendum stated, shall the state of Illinois legalize the sale of marijuana? But from a marketing research perspective and methodology, there's a huge disconnect in translating that sentiment to then saying that this village wants and its residents want it to be sold here. Again, from a professional researcher's perspective, with over 40 years' experience, one just cannot make that giant leap of logic. For example, we might say that we want a landfill site in the state of Illinois, but does that mean that we want it here in Arlington Heights? I don't think so. Then there's been much discussion about the possible revenues of $300,000 or $500,000. To be intellectually honest, we must analyze social costs like what Colorado's experienced in the last 5 or 6 years of retail. Actual social costs have been 4.5 to 1. 4.5 to 1. That wipes out revenue entirely. According to a report published by the Centennial Institute, for every dollar gained in tax revenue, Coloradians spend approximately $4.50 to mitigate the effects of $1 of legalization. So, if revenues are $300,000, and that's a big if, social costs could run as much as $1.2 million. $1.2 million, ladies and gentlemen. Revenue is the tip of an iceberg. Social costs are the biggest part below the surface of the iceberg. We know what happened to the Titanic, right? Consider Colorado's fourfold cost to revenue, with higher ER visits in their hospital, crashing their system. One of their hospitals is going to go out of business. Traffic accidents, fatalities, increased crime, violence, and greater homelessness, addiction issues. In Colorado, the number of auto accidents and drivers testing positive for marijuana jumped to 145% from 2013 to 2016, according to the Denver Post article of August 2017. There are other findings. Marijuana figured in more fatal crash as overall, according to 20%, representing 20% of their fatal crashes. With Arlington Park Racetrack, we would also have a large number of non-residents coming in to buy marijuana, and they don't necessarily care about our village. If Arlington Heights has become a retail destination, we must factor these costs and weigh against the relative small revenues that seem like gold. And we talked about other villages have opted out. Mayor Lightfoot has opted out of the Gold Coast and Michigan Avenue and Navy Pier. Well, why has she done that? Because she knows that she doesn't want that happening, right? So trustees, please consider these cost issues, our quality reputation of this village, and the impact on non-residents buying drugs in our wonderful village. Please look beyond the small amount of revenue. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bruce. Next is Heidi Tinknell, and then on deck is Lisa Doty.
Good evening, Village Board. I'm Heidi Tinknell, a 35-year resident with 40 years of high school experience. As a former department chair in District 211, I have the unique perspective on the implications of greater retail marijuana for our students in schools. Students will now have much greater access to marijuana from older friends, siblings, and even adults. When you have more convenient retail stores in the community, usage will go up regardless of age limits. In my 40 years of experience, I have witnessed the catastrophic impact on students when they are using and under the influence of marijuana and its ramifications in the classroom. It creates a nightmare for educators to effectively run their classes, dealing with unruly behavior, discipline issues, apathy, higher absenteeism rates, and overall poor performance. All this resulting in a disruptive classroom setting for all students. Colorado has experienced a 33% absentee rate since allowing retail marijuana. Many cognitive studies clearly show that young people's brains are still under formation in their teens and in their 20s. Marijuana has demonstrated impact on brain function, development, and performance. Higher THC levels mean much greater levels of addiction and mental health issues. The tragic results is greater trips to our hospital ER for chronic psychotic disorders, including anxiety, depression, mood and personality disorders, schizophrenia, and even suicide. These are just a few of the significant issues associated with having an easy access with destination retailer in our village. Easier access means greater usage, period. As an educator in the front lines, I plead with you to consider these serious issues impacting our youth, educators, and schools. What kind of statement does it say to our youth that we're okay with setting drugs in our village? That is a moral question to place before your hearts. This is Arlington Heights, a high reputation community. Surely we can do better than this. Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi. Next is Lisa Doty, and then Lee Strauss.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I am a long-term resident of Arlington Heights. I was actually born in Arlington Heights. I came back to Arlington Heights, chose this community specifically to raise my family here. I'm a 50-something-year-old woman who has, my husband is 57.
That's out of the bag.
I have 16-year-old twin boys. And when we're talking about, I hear so much fear and so much, people are just clutching their pearls and just so upset over this idea of an adult medical or adult recreational marijuana. Who would use adult recreational marijuana? I would. I will. I was really excited that the state went ahead and regulated so it could be taxed, it could be licensed, it could be regulated. So what I would like to do is to spend my money in Arlington Heights. I try as much as possible. I shop in Arlington Heights. I live a couple blocks from the little Jewel on Vale. I do most of my shopping in Arlington Heights. I would love to also be able to buy recreational cannabis in Arlington Heights and also be able on my way home to stop at the little Jewel, get a frozen pizza, a box of Twinkies, something like that, so that when I go home and I relax with my marijuana, I will have spent my money in Arlington Heights. I'm not going to be doing anything other than maybe watching a movie or listening to Little Pink Floyd. And that's really your typical adult marijuana user, recreational marijuana. I'm not going to be giving it to my kids. I'm not going to be giving it to their friends. Because for one thing, the way that it's set up with recreational marijuana, it costs a lot of money. This is not your college dime bag. This is serious money that this is. And these are upscale businesses as far as I can tell looking at people's websites. So I'm just telling the board, I would really like them to go ahead and allow the recreational dispensaries. The other point that came up a lot was a moral issue. I grew up in Arlington Heights. Everywhere we went outside of Arlington Heights, we heard about the racetrack. I'm morally opposed to gambling, but it's legal in the state of Illinois. And the board of Arlington Heights has always approved things that dealt with the track. So I can't legislate someone else's morality. I don't want anybody else telling me, too, that I don't have a choice to do something that's perfectly illegal in this state. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Lisa. No clapping, please. And then next is Lee Strauss, and on deck is Brad Doty.
Hi there. My name is Lee. I am a mother and a participant in the Village of Arlington Heights. I just want to point out that the Colorado Division of Criminal Justice has put out a report of the impact of marijuana use on teenagers. It rose up a tick after the legalization, and then they did education programs, very prominent advertising of the impact of marijuana on the brains of teenagers, and use fell. It has remained flat since then because of education. It is up to the parents to decide how to educate their children. I plan to educate my sons well on responsible drug use, whether it's alcohol or marijuana, because the reality is that it is everywhere currently, black market everywhere. The problem with the vapes is that it's black market. We do not know what's in those cartridges. We do not know what's in those batteries, and those batteries might actually be the issue with the vaping. So, you know, there's liquor stores on every corner. It feels like there are 33 off-site consumption stores in Arlington Heights. This drug, marijuana, is less damaging to a body, as studies are starting to show. Our data is light, but Colorado is starting to turn up data on the impact that this drug has on people. There are psychological effects. I am completely supportive of this 1,000-foot walk from high schools, but, you know, I can't imagine elementary school students are going to be going there. It's just not really, the use amongst less than 13-year-olds is falling. Teen use, again, is flat. So the last advantage of having these dispensaries is that we have better knowledge of the product that people are purchasing. So we know the THC contents of the marijuana leaf that people are buying now. People can make informed decisions on what they're getting. You buy black market, you have no idea what's in that little bag of yours. But the advantage of the dispensaries is now you will know. You will know what you're putting into your body, and I think that that is one of the most important parts of moving this from the black market into regular consumption.
Thanks, Lee. Next is Brad Doty, and then Nicole Grassi.
I'm Brad Doty. My wife just gave you my age. I, too, would like to thank the trustees for all the work you guys do. It's largely a thankless job. And I know sometimes some of you are on the same side of an issue as me, and sometimes the same people are against my issue. So I know it must be very frustrating and difficult work for you. I'm the father of two boys, juniors at Rolling Meadows. They currently have an option to buy marijuana. They can smoke pot whenever they want to. They can drink alcohol whenever they want to. They can do vapes and get that plastic stuff in their lungs. There's a black market out there. They chose not to do it because we've talked to them about adults and said, wait until you get a little older. A lot of their friends at Westgate are smoking dope and drinking alcohol, and they're addicted already. Sophomore, junior year of high school. One of their friends decided to have an acid party the other day. That was a bad scene. If you guys think that your decision here has anything to do with the LSD market, the marijuana youth market, or anything else, you are delusional. If it's out there, they can get it cheap. I don't know. I haven't smoked dope in 25 years. I don't think my wife has either. But I'm sure that it's not $18 a cigarette. And I understand the cannabis cigarettes at these sort of dispensaries will be about $18 a piece. So if you put a 3% tax on it, it'd be 54 cents a person. The market does not make any sense that a 21-year-old is going to go there and pay $18 for one cigarette of marijuana, then divvy it up to his 15-year-old friends and somehow make money on that. The economics aren't there. It's not going to get in the teenage hands because the economics are simply not there. A lot of people are well-intentioned here, but they have the wrong argument. Marijuana, like the one gentleman said, was legal until 1937. William and Asa Dunn could grow marijuana and smoke it all they wanted to, if they wanted to. I have no idea. We assume nobody in the 19th century smoked marijuana. Guess what? They probably did, some of them. It was outlawed in 1937. There was an experiment with outlawing alcohol in the late 19-teens. People drank anyway. A lot of white industrialists lost money, so they repealed that constitutional amendment and made alcohol legal again. The national government still has not repealed this statutory law that was passed in 1937 outlawing marijuana. Basically, marijuana is not as bad for you as alcohol in a lot of ways. Doesn't mess up the body as much. It's not as addictive as caffeine. As cigarettes, as tobacco, nicotine. Why don't we treat marijuana, tobacco, and alcohol the same way? But I just want to leave you with, a lot of people are arguing the wrong thing. It is not up to this board to decriminalize marijuana. It is not up to this board to tax and regulate marijuana. It's not up to this board to decide for us or save us from evil marijuana. It's not up to you to push your religion onto me and the rest of us. If you don't like pot, don't buy it. It is up to this board to decide whether Arlington Heights is going to get their cut of it and whether we're going to tax and regulate it at the same time as Buffalo Grove, Wheeling, and other places are going to tax and regulate it.
Brad, let me ask you
thank
to finish up. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Next is Nicole Grassi, and then Jeremy Unruh.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak. I am an 18-year resident of Arlington Heights. I am an ordained minister. I'm a member of a church in Arlington Heights, but I have spent the past 28 years in both hospice and hospital chaplaincy. And I wanted to make really 2 points here today. I echo what the man right before me said in many of his points. But what I wanted to mention is my concern that, unfortunately, an outside group sponsored by the Illinois Family Institute has sent a lot of flooding of emails to you to opt out. I am here to request you opt in, and I'd like to give you a couple reasons why. First, my concern is that we have people who may not be residents of Arlington Heights trying to sway what we do in Arlington Heights, and I believe that we as residents and our elected officials should be the ones to decide what we do in our village. So that is the main point with that. The second point is my own experience as a chaplain in healthcare. Because I'm in healthcare, I'm not able to smoke pot, even though it will be legal. I am not allowed to. But I still am asking you to opt in, and this is why. In my 28 years, I have witnessed people like everybody in this room who smoke pot, and they get it on the streets. Medical marijuana has been wonderful for people to help with a lot of the physical symptoms, the mental health symptoms, PTSD. Many veterans smoke pot, and they don't do it medically because it's expensive. There's a very limited amount of symptoms that you can have to qualify for medical marijuana, but it's mainly expensive, so they get on the black market. So again, like it's been said, we can't decide whether or not this is the law of the land. It is. And there are people like us everywhere who've been smoking pot, getting it off the street. Adult use cannabis is happening. It's happening in our village. It's happening all over. We just have the ability to control it, and I hope that you will vote to opt in. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Next is Jeremy Unruh, and then Russell Kolb.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I rise to urge my support for the authorization of the adult use retail sales of cannabis in the village of Arlington Heights. You are faced with a decision here tonight, but also as you continue to evolve this ordinance process, and that is to do one of two things. You can either tax and regulate the adult use of cannabis here, or you can ignore the problem. And what we're suggesting here is that this is an opportunity for you to have some semblance of control over what happens in your village. And that's the control that has been vested in a municipality by the state under the statute. And so I urge you not to ignore that, not to turn your back on that, but to use that opportunity to quash the black market. The risks that we've seen, the risks that we're talking about, are all associated with black marketeering in the cannabis space. Does a drug dealer ask for identification? Do the two guys pinched up in Kenosha making tens of thousands of bootleg vape cartridges a day, did they send those products out to an independent laboratory for third-party testing to ensure that what's on that label is actually in that product, or that there are no noxious compounds or substances in that? The answer is no. And so I urge you to at least retain the ability to regulate and to tax this product in your community. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeremy. Next is Russell Kolb, and then on deck is Andre Nexwids.
I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you for providing it, and I also respect the rights of my fellow neighbors to disagree. Me and my family, we firmly are opposed to allowing recreational marijuana. I'd like to provide comment, not to ask questions, but on the website there's public safety implications. I'd like to just comment on a few of those items that have been posted, such as the village would not be responsible for regulating such stores. I'm a regulator in another industry. They care about what I say. They don't care about what anybody else says. I think we're losing a voice if we don't have the ability to regulate. Since we can't, I'm further opposed to it. The village quotes, the website indicates that the village has experience with medical cannabis. Fine, but we don't have experience with recreational cannabis. There's too many unknowns there. The third item talks about theft, and that there is no increase of theft appreciably in those retail areas. That's fine, maybe not, but certainly with drug use, there are people that want the drugs, they don't have the money, people have said how expensive it is. There is an increase, potential increase for theft in the community at large. I'm concerned about that. This analysis presumes that the consumption will be the consumption will not be on the premises. How is that policed? We have rules, we have laws, but are we going to have the ability to police that? I don't think so entirely. People have spoken enough about the cost, the social cost. I also want to say that my wife and I, we visited Colorado. People here tonight have spelled out a lot of information about what's happening in Colorado and in the upper west part of America. And those numbers are compelling. Please consider them. But more compelling is being there and seeing it. Seeing is believing. I have never seen so many young homeless people. People are on the street smoking it. Young men and women are laying on the sidewalks, and they're in the parks smoking it. They're in front of the county buildings. They're smoking it. And they have the same ordinances that you can't smoke it in public. I don't believe it can be policed the way it needs to be policed. I don't think it should be a need to police it. Therefore, we should not have it. But that's all I had to say. Everything else has been reiterated. So thank you again for the time.
Thanks, Russ. Next is Andre. Andre, why don't you pronounce your last name for us, if you would?
Don't worry, I'm used to it. Good evening, Mayor Hayes.
What's your last name, please?
Last name is Natchweed, Andre Natchweed, yes.
Okay.
Good evening, Board and Mayor. Thank you for your time and ears tonight. I'm Andre Natchweed. I'm a 39-year resident of Arlington Heights. My wife, Christine's a medical doctor. We raised 2 daughters in Arlington Heights, and I am not in favor of allowing the sale of recreational marijuana in Arlington Heights. Just want to leave you a few factoids tonight that in my research into this that I found very interesting and influenced me. Number one, if we don't allow it, we're in fairly good company. A few statistics: California, 1 in 7 cities allow the sale of cannabis on their properties. 1 in 7. That's 71 cities out of 482 total. In Colorado, it's more around 1 in 3. 82 of Los Angeles County's 88 cities prohibit the retail sales of cannabis. And in Nevada, where recreational cannabis has been legal since 2017, nearly 1/2 of municipalities have prohibited sales. Interesting statistics. But let's look on the other side of the coin. It's like the cities that do allow it. What are the main reasons they do allow it? And in most of the arguments I've read about in cities where they make the decisions and actually talk about it, there seem to be 2 major points. One of them is to make money, and the other one is that pot really is harmless, or worse, it's not that harmful. From the money viewpoint, They are not making very good money on it at all. It's been stated several times that way. But let me give you what I found are the top reasons why it's not making such good money. One is high taxes. A lot of taxes are being put on this, so it keeps driving the price up. There's cost to test the marijuana. You have to actually test it for harmful chemicals, and that is very, very expensive, especially to the level of almost medicinal use you want to use. Even if it's recreational, you don't want to harm people. There's a lack of banking. Banks are still reluctant to handle cash from pot because it is still an illegal drug under federal law. It's a Schedule I narcotic. So if you add all that up, what happens is the price is too high, so you now have competition. Competition up against the thousands of unlicensed delivery services that are going into the cities already. And on top of that, because we've just stated this other fact, you have limited outlets. There aren't that many left anymore. So the money goes down, doesn't work. The fact that pot maybe is harmless or is just not that bad, I think some people have stated, but let me give you a quick reference. Dr. Russell Blaylock puts out a monthly newsletter. He's a 25-year practicing board-certified neurologist, or neurosurgeon, I'm sorry. And he has definitely shown that in the article, he discusses in great length the hazards of marijuana on neurological function and brain development, psychoses, suicides, behavioral issues. Pregnant women have increased use of marijuana, and that has led to damage to children. So not good at all. So
Just finish your thought if you would, Andre.
sure, just a quick quote. In how other towns are handling it, in Manhattan Beach, the mayor have said, "We've taken a deliberate approach to see how things shake out elsewhere. I think that's proven to be the smart approach." So at worst, say no.
Thank you,
Thank
Andre. Next is Adam Krasowski, and then Daniel Quinn.
Hi, sorry I didn't get the on-deck call. My name's Adam Krasowski. Born and raised in Arlington Heights. Grew up in Surrey Ridge, moved back home, 3-year-old daughter, 1-year-old daughter. Spent about 3 years in Scarsdale, left District 25 to go back to Surrey Ridge, right? So that's my home. I'm not an opt-out, I'm not an opt-in. Here to join Kip in the advocacy of Flaherty Jewelers as being the #1 potential location. I'm kidding. So 1816 South Arlington Heights Road. It's 1,100 feet from Juliet Low High School. So you say that they're not allowed to go too close to the schools. 1,000 feet, 900 feet, 1,100 feet. That's pretty close to the elementary school. That neighborhood, property value has been declining. District 59, Juliet Low. I don't want to get into the whole school board thing. I go to those meetings as well, even though my oldest is a 3-year-old. The stigma of being, the weed neighborhood, don't want that. There's a lot of other problems. There's a shooting in the Walmart parking lot. There's gang activity in the Red Roof Inn. There's robberies in that Jewel parking lot, right? Put it someplace else, not 1,100 feet from my elementary school. That's really my biggest issue here. I mean, the people that are just fighting so hard for this thing, I mean, it's a silly buzz. I've smoked a ton of marijuana in my life. I don't anymore. It's silly, it's stupid. Just put it someplace else. I'm not an opt-in, I'm not an opt-out guy. By all means, I think that it leads itself towards, if you have to guess who's gonna be the first place to get it, it's gonna be that dispensary. They're the medical one, they've got the proven track record, they've got the runway to be the front runner. Don't do it. I'd say don't do it at all. Don't really care, either opt in or opt out. Don't do it there, please. Take care of Surrey Ridge, take care of Heritage Park. There's other neighborhoods that if you're gonna have to do it, they can support it better, right? Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Next is Daniel Quinn, and then on deck is Art Ellingson.
Good evening. I'll be brief. Just want to say that I am in favor of option 1, which prohibits the sale of recreational marijuana in the village of Arlington Heights. To me, I cannot see any overriding benefit as to the village. I don't understand why the village would want to get involved in selling or having locations within its boundaries that can sell marijuana. The only benefit seems to be the generation of tax revenue, and we've heard from previous testimony that that most likely gets offset by expenses associated with social cost pertaining to the sale of marijuana. So I just don't see the benefit of having of selling marijuana within the confines of the village. As to its residents who want to smoke marijuana and who want to purchase it, it seems like from what we've heard, there's going to be a lot of villages in the surrounding area that are going to be, have locations within their parameters selling recreational marijuana. So it doesn't seem like it's going to be too hard for residents of Arlington Heights to obtain it if that's what they want to do. So that's really all I have to say. I just think it'd be a good idea for Arlington Heights to not get involved in the sale of recreational marijuana. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Next is Art Ellingson, and then Yasau Yoon.
Thank you for hearing me this evening. My name is Art Ellingson. I bought my house in Arlington Heights in 1985, which means I've lived here for 30 some odd years. I'm opposed to selling recreational marijuana in Arlington Heights, but I'm going to give you an if you do decide to do that. I want to remind you that if you put a tape measure at the corner of Arlington Heights Road and Dundee Road, you stretch it out for 1,000 feet, you're still in front of the property owned by Buffalo Grove High School across the street. That property line is more than 1,000 feet, I think. I haven't gone out and measured it, but I'm pretty sure if you state your distance as 1,000 feet from that corner, you're going to be selling it right across the street from Buffalo Grove High School, which is not a good idea. I mean, on the other side. But I attended last winter sometime a 2-hour-long town hall meeting organized by Marty Moylan, former mayor of Des Plaines, current Illinois state rep from Des Plaines, a Democrat, and of course the Democrats in Springfield voted to legalize this. Marty Moylan was fighting it tooth and toenail. He brought in multiple doctors from Colorado saying how horrible it is. One of these ER docs from not Denver, but a small, like Boulder, I think is where she was from, said a boy came to school, 16-year-old boy, and his friend said, "Hey, you want a chocolate bar?" Now, I don't know of anybody, 16-year-old boys, who will say no to a chocolate bar. This chocolate bar wasn't a Hershey bar, but if you broke it apart, every single piece, like a Hershey bar, the standard dollar-sized Hershey bar breaks up into 8 individual pieces. This broke up into 16 individual pieces. But every single piece was a dose of THC. This boy ate the whole bar, 16 doses. He's been in a mental hospital ever since, from what I've heard. This is a boy who didn't even know there was marijuana in this chocolate bar. They told horror stories for a couple of hours. The library was closing at 9 o'clock. They were going to kick us out because they were closing. But because Marty Moylan's the former mayor, he convinced them to keep this meeting going on, and they kept talking about the stuff. Marijuana is bad. I spent my mid-20s in New York as a drug rehab counselor. Teen Challenge was the name of the organization I worked with. The story is told in the book, The Cross and the Switchblade, or if you want to go to the library and get the Cliff Notes version, there's a movie called The Cross and the Switchblade movie. Pat Boone starred as David Wilkerson. Eric Estrada starred as a gang member named Nicky Cruz. Every heroin addict I've ever talked to in New York told me they started with marijuana. Marijuana is a gateway drug. Please do not let any part of it in or near Arlington Heights. Thank you.
Thanks, Art.
And I'll give you a PS. The whole Tea Party's behind this, behind not approving it.
Thanks, Art. Next is Yasau Yoon, and then Di Yang. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. I'm Yasau Yoon. I'm currently a Village of Skokie Human Relations Commissioner. I actually went to village of Northbrook the other day, a few weeks ago, and spoke about the recreational marijuana. They already made a choice and did not listen and decide to move forward where they're gonna make dispensaries. I hope Arlington Heights can make some difference here. The main argument that they brought at the time was that if they opt out, those who want marijuana will go other villages. And so let's have it here too. So in my opinion, this is the wrong mindset. It's like this. Okay, let's make our village dirty because the others are already dirty. And we have to change the mindset. Second, marijuana lobbyists at the time, they actually came to the meeting and then endorsed for the recreational marijuana, mainly because they said it can generate the revenues tax. However, in the long term, in my opinion, this will generate more problems, such as law enforcement and sanitation of the villages and traffic accidents, etc. And I believe that we will spend more money to keep this in the village, but we also have to think that we have to make the village safe environment for everybody. And right now, the downtown Chicago, they actually ban on having dispensary in the downtown. I work in Neiman Marcus, downtown Chicago, and I see clients and also other people who are laying on the ground, and they actually did a pot. It's very stinky, and you can smell it from far away. So they know, the mayor even know that this is not going to attract visitors, other visitors, and it's not going to make good environment for the downtown. So they decide not to have dispensaries. So this is no question of whether we're gonna have it or not, because as you can see, the downtown, even out, they decided not to have the dispensaries. And I think also that the state of Illinois also made their big mistake because they choose to make easy money instead of a community. After we pass this, it is hard to stop it, go back. It's impossible, almost. And I want to ask you before, whether you're gonna have this or not, you're gonna think carefully how it's gonna impact the community. The bottom line is—
Finish your thought, if you would.
Yeah, the bottom line is we are not here to worship money, but we are here to protect our community. Thank you all.
Right, thank you. Next is Dee Yang, and then Debbie Ruttenberg.
Dear trustee, thank you very much for listening to us. Before I left my home, I received an international call from my dearest aunt calling from China in the city from Wuhan, Hubei province. She loved me very much. I know that when I was a kid. During our talk, my aunt begged me sincerely and heartbroken. She said, please do not get involved in any anti-drug related activities for 3 reasons. First, you might be killed. You might be killed by the people who like to have it. Second, English is not your mother language. Will the people, as those trustee, they sit so high, will they listen to you? Thirdly, you have 2 young kids. You have your husband, you have your daddy, and you have your mother-in-law to take care of. You're so busy, as well as yourself you need to take care. So please do not get involved. I know my aunt loves me very much. I really appreciate her love. But for this time, I have to lie. I told her, yes, you're right. But still, I take my car key. I left my 2 kids at home, coming here with hope that my voice will be indeed heard by you. At the beginning of this meeting, I know that all of you gave the Pledge of Allegiance. I assume that all of you believe in our Heavenly God and will try to be righteous person. Drug is not good. This is not that hard to figure out. Drug had ever destroyed the nation of China, if you learn the world history. We cannot sell it to the public. It's really a tragedy. I don't want to see that disaster. So, as a sister in Christ, I would like to remind everyone here, my brothers, my sisters, the life on this earth for us is really short, temporary. So, please give a satisfying answer, not only to your people and yourself, but also to our dear God. I believe when I leave, you will make the right decision and could face our Lord without any fear one day in the future. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you. Please opt out.
Thanks, Dee. Next is Debbie Rutenberg, and then I'm having a difficult time reading this name. I think it's Janice Ferris. Hopefully that's close enough. Okay. Debbie?
Hello, hi, thank you. I'm Debbie Rutenberg. I'm an actual resident of Arlington Heights. I moved here years ago because I wanted to be a part of a community that's one of the best in Chicagoland. And just like all of you, family is everything to me. I'm a good person with high morals, values, ethics. I pride myself on doing the right thing, helping those in need, and paying it forward. This is the type of person who comes before you today, a person who strongly supports the legal sale of adult-use cannabis in our village. We are already aware that it has scientifically proven medicinal qualities. We're now discussing cannabis for adult recreation, just as alcohol is. As we know, our town sells alcohol along with tobacco and has an internationally renowned gambling institution since 1927, a racetrack. Adult use cannabis falls under these same regulations. I feel so strongly about this that I felt I must come before you today. I've been hearing many claims touting recommendations that don't support selling cannabis for adult use. I encourage you to do all the research, read it, and understand it to its full complexity, not just what some of these folks are saying. Most of all, these claims are false, without merit, and even some that the doctors have proclaimed. We're able to choose organic, high-quality foods. We must now allow legal adult cannabis with known high-quality ingredients as well. We live in Illinois where this will be legal in less than 2 months. Please remember, this is not about judgment. It's about doing the right thing for Arlington Heights and not believing the myths and the fallacies. So what our focus is on now is being fiscally responsible. We have a duty to our families and our village to reap these excise taxes. If we don't act with ordinances B and C, others have and most certainly will. We have the opportunity to create regulations for ourselves and not count on these neighboring communities to do what we prefer, because they may certainly not. This is also a fact that cannot be ignored. We've elected you, our village board, to oversee the city budget, establish strategic priorities, and set policies. This policy decision will help achieve another meaningful improvement to our community. I'm fully confident that you will allow and regulate this industry in Arlington Heights in a respectful, impartial, and balanced manner. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Debbie. Next is it Janice? Yes, it is. All right, I got it right. And then the last card I have is Roxanne Getz.
Hi, thank you. I didn't usually get up and speak at these things, but I've been sitting here and here I am. And I would like to say that Prohibition did not turn out well. And I'm also stunned hearing all these remarks because now I'm assuming no one in this room drinks. In this town, we have masses of bars, liquor stores. Alcohol is for adults. Cannabis is for adults. And all of you that are so certain that your children are out of control, spend more time with them. We have liquor stores, we have bars, and we're going to have cannabis too. That's just the way it is. So, short and sweet.
All right, thanks, Janice. And then the last card I have is Roxanne Getz. Do I have any more, Kim?
I don't have any more.
Okay. All right, is there anyone else who'd like, if you just give your card to Kim, if you would.
Hi, I'm Roxanne Getz, and I'm a 30-year resident of Arlington Heights. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and for the board for listening to all of us tonight. I've heard a lot of different things. I have my opinion, as many people do, but I had an opportunity to hear both sides, and there certainly is truths on both sides, but I'm going to speak to you as a business professional who has worked in the area of taxes her entire career. Rarely do budgetary amounts of taxes that are supposed to come out of any great idea that somebody has come to fruition. And most of them end up costing more than what you think you're going to make. So for those who have purely a financial point of view as to why to do this, please think carefully because those estimates never come out to be true. I personally am against the sale of marijuana in the village for a number of reasons that are very personal to me. I can appreciate the benefits of marijuana use for those who are ill and terminally ill. When I moved to this village, my husband was diagnosed with metastatic lung cancer and he died very quickly after getting here. The one thing that we were not allowed to do was use medical marijuana because it was not legal at that point in time, though it would have helped with some of his needs. But he also told me he would not use it because he got his cancer from smoking cigarettes. And the smoke from marijuana is worse on lung tissue than smoke from regular cigarettes. So this is a really difficult decision for you, but I've also kept a tally. And most of the people that have come up, it's been more than 2 to 1 against voting for marijuana in this village. I would just ask you to think very carefully. There are a lot of considerations, and maybe the best option to take is just to think about it. When you did your little presentation, it didn't say that if you opted out of it for now that you couldn't change your mind. So maybe the thing to do is to wait a year or whatever and see what's happening, and then you can always look at it again. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Roxanne. Next is Lynn Lyons. I believe we have one more. Lynn, come on forward.
Can't believe I'm doing it. Okay. I just have a quick story. Either way, it's like I moved to Arlington Heights on Fernandez across from Juliet Lowe, Heritage Park, in 1968, and I went to Fremd. We had a smoking area and everything. You know what? Everyone wanted to drink alcohol. It was like everyone smoked weed, but you know what? Alcohol was like the main thing. Opiates, to me, I think, is the issue in schools these days. My mother, who's 90, still lives on Fernandez. I just moved from the Gold Coast to take care of her. So like right across from, I go running in the park every night at Heritage Park. All the kids are up on the toboggan hill. Guess what? They're all drinking alcohol. They know me. It's like, it's just Lynn. Don't worry, it's just Lynn. My mother had very bad neuropathy from her diabetes. She was on opiates, gabapentin. You know what? At this point, the dispensary is opened by Jewel, where we go every day, or every week. And I said, Mom, you know what? Let's just try it. You know what? She's off the opiates, which is making me happy because I have an older son who's 38 who went to Fremd, never smoked weed. He's a heroin addict. He's in Nevada in prison right now. Never smoked weed. It's just a story. I'm kind of either way, whatever goes, because you get it wherever you want to get it. It's just, just my story.
All right. Thanks, Lynn.
Okay.
Appreciate you sharing. And last is Tommy Thomas.
My name is Tommy Thomas. I live at 1612 North Belmont. I've been a resident of Arlington Heights for 46 years. Pot, from all the studies that you see out there, it's the beginning for those who want to get into other drugs. Why do we want to be in Arlington Heights, the beginning point for those folks? Just opt out of it. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Tommy. Well, those are all the blue cards that I have, so I don't see anyone else who wishes to address the board, and so we're going to close the public comment period of this public meeting and turn back to the village board for deliberation. I just want to thank you. We're right on schedule. I thought it might go an hour and a half, and it went an hour and a half. And so I very much appreciate your cooperation and your respect for each other. Very much appreciate your participation in the process. And this is a democratic decision-making process, and your input is very, very important to this village board. We've received, in addition to all the comments we've received tonight, we did have one other public meeting on this issue a couple of months ago and received a lot of comments at that time. And in the interim 2 months, we've certainly received many, many emails and phone calls and personal visits. And I know many, if not all, of the members of this village board have done their own independent research in one way or another. And so I think we've done our due diligence on this, and we very much appreciate your participation in helping us make this decision here tonight. I have the opportunity to go first, and sometimes I choose to do that, sometimes I don't. But I am going to take the opportunity to go first this evening because I think this is a very important issue for the village of Arlington Heights, and I think it's important for the mayor or village president of this town to speak first and very strongly about his feelings on this particular subject. I've been on the board. I'm in my 29th year now on the village board as both the village trustee and village president. And the thing that I'm most proud of in those 29 years is the reputation that this village has earned as a great place to live and to raise a family. It's a family-oriented community. It's primarily a residential community. We've been voted, if you don't know, the best place to live in the Daily Herald readership area 3 out of the last 4 years in the Daily Herald Reader's Choice Awards. And that's very special to me, very meaningful to me as the mayor of this community. It says a lot about this community, what our residents are willing to contribute on a daily basis as volunteers. And in many, many ways, it's very much a team effort. And I've pledged as both a village trustee and as the mayor of this town to do all I can to preserve and protect the reputation of this community that's it's earned over many, many years now. And I've based every vote that I've taken over the course of those 29 years on one principle and one principle alone. In every vote that I've taken, I've asked myself one question. Is it in the best interests of this community, in my own opinion, based on all the facts and information available to me? And there's been a number of decisions that we've made over the course of those 29 years that I've been on this village board. A lot of them had a great deal of money at stake, including whether or not we were going to put red light cameras in the village of Arlington Heights. There was a lot of money at stake there. One mayor told me that one red light camera could result in $250,000 in revenue to a village. But we decided as a village board that that was not in the best interest of this community, regardless of how much money we would earn. And so we decided against that. We've taken a number of votes, or at least had straw polls on whether or not video gaming, and I distinguish that from the gambling at the racetrack, which I think are apples and oranges. That's been here for 100 years. Not the same as video gambling in our convenience stores and in our restaurants and other small businesses. But we decided as a village board for years now that video gaming, despite the money that our businesses and we could get from sales tax revenue, was not in the best interests of this community, regardless of the money that we were going to get from it. And so we've taken stances on a number of different issues that are very similar to this one. And so I really base my decision here tonight on what I feel is in the best interest of this community, and whether or not the sale of adult use cannabis would be in the best interest of this community, and whether or not it would enhance or diminish the quality of life in Arlington Heights, which I always say is second to none. And I believe with all my heart that allowing the sale of recreational cannabis in Arlington Heights would be the wrong thing to do and would not enhance the quality of life. In fact, it would diminish the quality of life in Arlington Heights and the reputation that this village has earned for many, many decades now. And regardless of what the state did, I understand they legalized it, but that doesn't mean that I have to contribute to a mistake that I think they made. And so I will support option 1 this evening, and I would encourage my fellow board members to do that as well. Who's next? Trustee Canty.
Well, it looks like not a lot of people want to be the first one to go after the mayor, but I don't mind. I'm used to taking some of these hits. Quick question for the staff. Can we talk a little bit about the way that we zone alcohol and tobacco? Are there restrictions in terms of where they can be in
Yes.
relation to schools and parks?
No, not in terms of liquor, yes. And I'm going to get this wrong. It may be 300 feet, but I'm not 100% sure. Does anybody, do you know? I don't know. It's been in the statute since about the mid-'60s.
Right.
Yeah. And it just has never been revisited. I do not believe there is a restriction on tobacco, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay. That's good enough for me, because I think I'm not going to get into the taxation or the money of it, because for me, that's not actually the biggest issue. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. This is not really a moral question for me. It wasn't before, and it is not now. The moral questions have been decided at the state level, and they have decided that we are going to legalize recreational marijuana use. I am a parent of 2 kids. I, like many of you that have spoken tonight, hope that my children will grow up to make good life choices. The way that I can do that is by being a good parent to them and hoping that I can lead them through example. As one of you mentioned, I don't take my kids to places where they don't belong. I don't really take them into bars or to hang out in parking lots of bars because they are children. But I do drink in front of my kids. And I always emphasize that this is a decision that I get to make as an adult. And when they are adults, I hope that they will also make good choices to drink responsibly and to do it within the law and to think about where they want to be in their future, as I have done at every step of my life from the time I was a small child making small decisions. So for me, this is a relatively simple issue. It is a matter of how many dispensaries will we allow in the village. It is not up to me to decide how anybody else will parent their kids, but I think that option B that staff has laid out is an excellent starting point for us to have that conversation about the number of dispensaries and other businesses and where we choose to zone them. I think the state has done a good job in setting up some restrictions that we can follow behind with our legislation. So I am in favor of ordinances B and C as set forth to allow dispensaries and also taxation.
Thank you, Trustee Canty. Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to all the speakers who came out tonight, especially those that live in the village of Arlington Heights. I really appreciated hearing from you. And I also want to thank those residents that I've spoken with over the months. We first started talking about this back in August. And this really isn't an easy decision for me because I thought, you know what, let's just take the sales tax dollars and move forward. And I really struggled with the state, you know, and I said back in August, I wasn't sure if I was an elected official at the state level how I would have voted, and that's because I really wanted to see marijuana use decriminalized, and so I'm going to give the state the benefit of the doubt, and that's really what the goal was, is to decriminalize the use of marijuana because it really is creating more problems by incarcerating people for the use of marijuana. But then let's bring it down to the village level. Even when we talk about the referendum, I mean, that's why I'm not a big fan of referendums because, you know, they just give you one line and you have to answer yes or no. they don't give you the options of, if we decriminalize marijuana, do you want it being sold, in your community? That wasn't the question. It was, should we legalize it or not? And so I'm not a big fan of referendums because they really never get to the point, nor do they really market them and let you know that when you go to vote that there might be a referendum on your ballot. I think that there is so much unknown, and there were so many conflicting statistics that were shared tonight. I mean, from one side, it's the best thing for you, and on the other side, it's going to kill you. So I think that there's got to be something in the middle. So it was really hard to kind of keep up with all that because we're not going to comment after each speaker, or else we'd be here till next week. All sales tax revenue that we've talked about tonight, they're complete estimates. Everything we talked about is estimates because nobody knows how much it's going to cost because we don't know what the supply and the demand is going to be. We have no idea when the first marijuana leaf will be sold because right now there's no way that by January, if a business could be open, that there would be someone to buy it from. I mean, it still has to be grown, and so they have to set up the growers. I mean, the only upside to all of this really is the revenue. And, people talked about control. The only control we have by opting in is to determine where they can be located and to tax them. That's the limit of our control. And for those that are concerned that if we don't allow the sale in Arlington Heights, you're still going to be able to enjoy it at your leisure. We're not taking away that right. All we're doing is talking about whether or not you can purchase it in the village of Arlington Heights. You can't really put a value on the brand of our village, and our residents have made it clear to me over these past months and even tonight that our brand and reputation should not be traded for sales tax revenue. While I'm steadfast in my resolve to maintain the lowest possible tax levy, this is not the best way to increase revenue. Once we allow cannabis sales, we can't put the genie back in the bottle. I think that this might be the best approach, is to kind of wait and see. Our obligation as elected officials is to provide for the safety and welfare of our citizens, and I concur with the village's Board of Health, and my vote for option A does not change your right to use marijuana for recreational use. Thank you.
Thanks, Trustee Scaletta. Trustee Padovani.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to everyone tonight that came and gave us your opinions, and to the many people that have sent us emails and calls and letters through the months. And I want to thank all the people I've personally talked to since way back in July when we started researching this. I've talked to over 100 people. And as I said back in August, my experience with talking to residents of Arlington Heights as their representative, as the person representing them here on this council, is basically thirds. 1/3 are adamantly against it, 1/3 are interested in it and want it, and 1/3 in the middle could go either way. And when I asked them, what's driving this either way for you, they all said, all the people in the middle said it was the revenue. It was the revenue that they'd like to capture in order to keep their taxes down, because everybody's concerned about their taxes. Understanding that, then in the last, I'm going to say month, as we've begun to get a real sense of what possible revenues could come into Arlington Heights, and the fact that not only are these estimates, but also that we're not really sure, and there's lots of evidence out there that it could be way below that. We're not sure. This is all new to us, of course. But when I started talking to the people in the middle about, okay, so maybe that revenue isn't there, and as Mr. Recklaus gave us a rundown on the possible revenue impact on a household. We have 33,000 households in this town, and you take that number, that revenue number, and divide it, and you go through all the other estimates, you're basically coming down to about $1.25 per month as impact on your tax bill or each household for an average household. So for me, it's not an issue of revenue anymore. In fact, that really dissipated the argument for the people in the middle. Once they learned that it's not that much, $1, maybe $2 a month, who knows? They were then saying, well, then why are we doing it? Because other than the taxes, they feel that having a dispensary here in Arlington Heights would not improve our life, would not improve the town. And the young couples that I spoke to would tell me that they chose to come to Arlington Heights. They could have gone to all kinds of other towns around the area, but they chose to come here because of the great schools, the great park district, the great library, and then the great community that we're part of here in Arlington Heights. And I think that a dispensary here, any number of dispensaries here, would not be an improvement in the community or the family-oriented community that we have here in Arlington Heights. So therefore, my vote or my leaning is towards agreeing with the mayor for option 1 of not allowing any of it here in Arlington Heights.
Thank you, Trustee Padovani. Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I also want to thank all of you who came out tonight. I'm thankful that doesn't look like we're going to go to 1 a.m. like an adjoining community did not too long ago. But I do want to thank you all for coming out and those of you who are here and those of you who are here and spoke. I also want to thank all the people that I've talked to and have emailed me and called me on this particular issue. And I do want to say that the vast majority of the people that spoke to me are Arlington Heights residents and identified themselves as so, or were people I know and live here. So I do want people to be to assure people that Arlington Heights residents have spoken, and as others up here have said, the significant majority want us to opt out and don't care so much about the revenue aspect of it. They don't feel that this Arlington Heights is the place they want to see recreational marijuana dispensaries, and frankly, I'm with them on that, which is why I lean towards option A, or Ordinance A. When the referendum occurred, what was that, about 2.5 years ago or a year and a half, before Election Day, I knew that it was going to come out with the results that it did. It's easy to say, sure, the state can legalize, it should legalize marijuana, but as Trustee Scaletta pointed out, it didn't say, and have it sold in my community. And I think when even though the results of the 30% of the people that voted on that was that the majority of those 30% voted in favor of legalization, I too remain skeptical because it doesn't specifically say, well, but here, it's okay to say, well, yeah, I want it legalized, but I don't want it sold around here, and there's no differentiation with this kind of a referendum. I actually really listened to and reflected on those whose concerns are on the tax revenue portion of it. I saw a very interesting program last night, a news program that pointed out in California the tax revenue has been significantly less than they expected over the time that I think 3 years that it's been legalized. So I'm skeptical and have been that the revenues that we would receive would be $300,000 to $500,000 a year, especially when you spread it out around other communities that may be opting in to go ahead and have medical marijuana dispensaries. And again, I have said this before, and I'll say it again, if you are concerned about sales tax revenue, shop in Arlington Heights. There's a lot of other things to buy here in Arlington Heights. There's food, there's clothing, there's home improvement products, there's vehicles, and if you shop here, all of that together will definitely bring in a lot more sales tax revenue than we would find from at most 3 medical marijuana, not medical, excuse me, recreational marijuana dispensaries. So is this what we really want here in Arlington Heights? I really don't think so. That's not what I hear. And as Mayor Hayes said, we've not been afraid to say no to other things that create revenue, such as video gambling and red light cameras. And therefore, I am leaning towards Ordinance A.
Thanks, Trustee LaBedz. Trustee Schwingbeck.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to echo a few things that not only my fellow trustees have said, but also you folks tonight. Appreciate you certainly coming out and sharing your thoughts with us. As we've all said, this is an important decision for us and one that I prepared for. I talked to a lot of residents on the phone, received a lot of letters, emails, and one-on-one talks with people. I've met with doctors to seek out their opinion on this issue. I've had the opportunity to meet with the representatives at PharmCan. I went and visited for a few hours Verilife and toured their facility. I had again, about a 2-hour meeting with the folks at MedMen. And then back earlier this year, up in Buffalo Grove, I went to a legislator and law enforcement discussion addressing the impact of marijuana. I can certainly understand that this is becoming a law on January 1st, and there isn't anything that we can do to stop that. I know the state of Illinois is looking for revenues from anywhere they can. They're in a financial situation where they're looking for that revenue, and I feel that Arlington Heights does not have that issue. We have a very healthy financial position. As many of you and my fellow board members have said, we do have a family-friendly community. We do have award-winning schools. We have an award-winning library, a fantastic park district, and this is a desirable community. People want to live here, and I know I have for 31 years. On the money side, I can't really say anything different that's already been said, but the amount of taxes that we would receive are extremely low when it comes to our overall budget, only about 0.3%. So for all of those reasons, this is an image thing with me for our village. I too would vote in favor of option 1 to opting out.
Thanks, Trustee Schwingbeck. All right, no clapping, please. Who's next? Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. Well, I can count, and I can see where we're at here on this, and it's an interesting night. I mean, I think it's really, really important to make sure you guys all know how much we up here appreciate your input here on both sides of this equation. I've lived in this town for 46 years. When I moved here, I was in 4th grade, and the drinking age was 18. I voted not too long ago to change the smoking age to 21. So not only can I, empathize with all of the good in those kinds of decisions, I find this one a little more difficult, and I'll tell you why. We do have liquor stores in a lot of places. Robin, how many liquor licenses do we have here?
We have a lot of liquor licenses. I'm not sure how many retail, maybe in the 30s,
Okay.
40s. We have over 100 liquor license holders.
And everyone in this room knows that alcohol kills your liver, and people die from that every year. And we all know what opioids do for addiction. We all know how many people, we don't know how many, but we know lots of people die from that every year. I don't know that I subscribe to the fact that smoking a joint or eating a THC-laced gummy bear is going to open the doors to heroin for everybody here. I mean, I think that seems a little silly to me. I have 4 children age 20 to 27. My guess is somewhere along the line they've each smoked some pot somewhere. Okay? I smoked pot and I inhaled. All right? I did it back in college. And guess what? I'm a trustee in this town. I got elected by a pretty large group of you guys out there, and I do the right thing most of the time. I feel like I try my darndest to do exactly what Mayor Hayes said, and that is make my decisions so that I can go home at night and look in the mirror and know that I voted for what I thought was the best for our town. And I've been here a long, long time, longer than most of you people with grayer hair than me. So what this does mean, though, to me, is that we're saying no to a small or medium-sized car dealership. Charles, who sits at the table over here, has to work awfully hard to get a car dealership in this town. And we lose them regularly to some of the other communities like Schaumburg and Palatine. Do you know that there's Arlington Toyota in Palatine? How silly is that, right? So we also, not too long ago, I remember we couldn't even have a sign on the I think it was Tuller's, or I'm not sure what it was, on the corner restaurant because it had the name Cocktails on it. That was the mentality of how this village behaved at one point. And so what we're saying here tonight is that it's okay to have a racetrack, that people gamble and come in from the train, from communities all around us, and it's okay to have 37 liquor licenses up and down the streets of all of our towns, of all of our neighborhoods. It's okay to walk across the street to Buffalo Grove, which may be right near Mr. Horowitz's school over there, BG, which we all think is wonderful, of course. But it's not okay to sell it and get the tax dollars in our own town. I think that's crazy. I think it's absolutely crazy. But that's what we're going to do tonight, and I'm okay with that. But I will tell you one last thing. When I ran to be a trustee 6 years ago, there was one thing that I heard more than anything else, and it was usually from a lot of people of the age of a lot of the folks here, and it was, don't raise my taxes. Do everything you can to stop raising my taxes. Because I have to move out of town if you keep raising my taxes. And I certainly don't want to do that. So when we vote on this tonight, let's all keep in mind that when the policemen have to come up with new ways to protect all of us from ourselves, who are going to use this, and the people who are legally able to buy it in Buffalo Grove or any other town like Wheeling, we don't know what's going to happen in Mount Prospect or Palatine or anything else yet. We have to pay for that. That is coming out of our police fund. And so I'm going to have to vote to send our policemen someplace to get educated on these things, buy the equipment that they need to do when they do come up with this breathalyzer, this curbside thing that they're going to have to come up with somehow. It's going to cost us money. So when that happens and your tax bill goes up, remember this meeting. This is a meeting that we all discussed it, and we've all said this is the right answer. I'm not so sure it's the right answer, but I am going to go along with my board. We have a good group of minds here, and everybody here is trying their hardest to do the right thing. I think it's a mistake, but I understand where we're going. I just want everybody to remember that. Thanks.
Thanks, Trustee Tinaglia. Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, let me echo the rest of the board in thanking all of you for coming tonight and sharing your thoughts on either side. Let me thank all the people that sent in the multiple emails, the multiple phone calls. The involvement was really important to me, and I appreciate it. Second thing, I appreciate the clarification on those businesses that would have been prohibited. I can count two. Because that was going to be a deal breaker for me if that loophole wasn't closed. So I appreciate that clarification. I guess when it comes down to it, I'm one of Trustee Padovani's middle 30. As far as legalization goes, I didn't have a strong opinion one way or another about legalization. I appreciate the decriminalization part of it. I've lived for over 50 years without legal marijuana and could have gone along just fine without it for another whatever I have left. But I wanted to put the tax revenue into a little bit different perspective because, yes, it's a very small percentage of our overall budget. But every year at budget time, we start talking about raising property tax levies by some margin of $500,000 to $800,000, and this would have, you know, if the tax revenue was even close to what the conservative estimate from our finance department was, it would have taken out a big chunk of that concern. This year may be a little bit different, but we are facing some revenue uncertainty moving forward. And so this is a small portion of the overall budget of the village, but it could be a very significant portion of an increased property tax revenue. And we're not just talking about this one issue, not having this revenue raising your property taxes. There's a lot of new fees and new taxes and things that people are always talking to us about and telling us about how they don't want any more taxes or more fees. And, you know, we try very hard to limit those kinds of impacts, and this is going to be one of those things. People say to me, on this issue, there are other ways that you can generate revenue. Well, I agree with the mayor about red light cameras and video gambling. What else is there? I haven't heard any other ideas about additional tax revenue to this kind of level. You know, other tax revenues are tens of K, not hundreds of K. So I also think that this is a lost opportunity for increased revenue for the village. It looks like it's going to go for option one, so I will leave my comments at that. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thanks, Trustee Baldino. Trustee Rosenberg.
Last but not least, so I agree with most of the comments that were made as far as from the standpoint of both pros and cons, and I struggle with the issue, and at our last meeting I was inclined to vote in favor of it, but I've muddled over this for a long time and kind of had second thoughts about that and read a lot of materials and heard a lot of things from all of you, and echo the thanks to all of you for your correspondence and for coming tonight. Could we use the revenue? Absolutely. I'm the financial guy on the board, and you know, I'm always looking for ways to cut expenses and add revenue. But I think there's a lot of hidden costs that a lot of us don't really see with the adoption of marijuana, and will they be there if we get the revenue or not? Absolutely. I think the police department has a big task in front of them going forward. There's no method to detect these types of things, you know, whether somebody's under the influence. Will there be additional costs to the village to do testing or any kind of devices that determine whether somebody's under the influence? Absolutely, but it's not there yet. So people will go into other cities and purchase it and bring it back home, and they'll end up getting the revenue. If we opt out, we're just sending the revenue to another town. Those are the arguments against it. And in my case, living up north, I live adjacent to Buffalo Grove, and they've already adopted to accept it. And, you know, we're on the south side of Dundee and some of the north part of Dundee is Arlington Heights, but right next to it is Buffalo Grove. So we could be facing things where right across the street from Arlington Heights is Buffalo Grove and a possible recreational marijuana shop, you know, that they could buy from. But as others have said, I think we have an image that the Arlington Heights projects, and as the mayor always refers to, we are a community that's second to none. We are family oriented, and I think we'll figure out a way to bridge the gap in the revenue and come up with other things that we can do. So I also will vote to opt out.
Thank you, Trustee Rosenberg. All right, is there any other comments from the board? Seeing none. Trustee Padovani? Anyone like to make a motion? Trustee Scaletta?
Move to adjourn?
No, we need to make a motion.
I'd love to do that.
I'll make the motion.
Yeah.
All right, Trustee Scaletta.
I would move to concur with the Board of Health's recommendation and adopt Ordinance A.
Second.
There's a motion by trustee Scaletta, seconded by trustee Padovani. Further discussion from the board? Seeing none, let's take a roll call. Kim, do you got it?
Trustee Baldino?
Let's
No.
go with the motion maker first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
And then,
Padovani?
yeah.
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
No.
No.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
No.
Schwingbeck?
Yes.
And President Hayes?
Yes. Well, the ayes have passage of option 1 to prohibit the sales of recreational marijuana in the village of Arlington Heights. We thank all of you for your participation in this process. And we very much appreciate your attendance here tonight and your participation, including all of those at home. So again, thank you very much. Mr. Reckles, any other business?
No, sir.
All right. Anything from the board? Trustee Scaletta?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by trustee Scaletta, seconded by trustee LaBedz. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.